Senior Constable George Devine had been sleeping soundly when he was suddenly woken by the sound of a galloping horse. It was Saturday, February 8, 1879, and the constable lived with his family at the police barracks in the small New South Wales town of Jerilderie. The horse's hooves came to a stop outside Constable Devine's front door, and he heard his name being called. The constable donned his uniform and stepped outside. He was soon joined by a colleague, Trooper Richards. Together, they stood on the veranda, looking at the stranger on horseback before them. The rider reached into his jacket and withdrew a revolver. "Throw up your hands," he said. "I'm Ned Kelly." The infamous bushranger was accompanied by the rest of the Kelly gang, his brother Dan Kelly and friends Joe Byrne and Steve Hart. Ned Kelly and Joe Byrne took the two policemen to the station's lockup and threw them in a cell. The next morning, the gang dressed in the officers' uniforms then paraded around the barracks. Townsfolk who glimpsed Ned and his men assumed they were troops passing through towards the Victorian border in search of the Kelly gang. The following day, Ned Kelly and Joe Byrne walked into town dressed in their police uniforms, with Trooper Richards between them. Behind them were Dan Kelly and Steve Byrne, both on horseback. The gang entered the Royal Mail Hotel and promptly took the publican hostage. Dan Kelly rounded up the hotel's remaining employees and stood guard over them alongside Steve Hart. Ned Kelly and Joe Byrne headed towards the bank next door. The bank's accountant was sitting in the banking chamber when he heard a noise. He looked up to see a drunk bushman stagger into the room via the building's rear entrance. Unfortunately, this was not a rare occurrence. Annoyed, the accountant began to tell the man to clear out, but the bushman, who was really Joe Byrne, suddenly straightened up and pulled out a revolver. "I am a Kelly," he said. At the front of the bank, Ned Kelly bailed up a junior clerk. He emptied the teller's safe of its contents. Then he turned his attention to the bank's inner safe. 2 keys were needed to open it. The accountant had one. The bank's manager, Mr. Tarleton, had the other. He'd been away on business and was expected back that morning. Mr. Tarleton was soon found in the bank's residential quarters, enjoying a long soak in a tub after riding back to Jerilderie. At first, he refused to help as he wanted to finish his bath. But eventually, he accompanied Ned Kelly to the safe. Joe Byrne held a sugar sack open as Mr. Tarleton reluctantly dropped all of the safe's coins and banknotes inside. In all, the Kelly gang were making off with more than £2,100. Ned Kelly then grabbed some jewellery from the safe, along with the townspeople's bills, mortgages and deeds. He destroyed most of the papers, declaring that all financial institutions were slavers and poor man crushers. Meanwhile, Jerilderie's newspaper editor, a man named Mr. Gill, was chasing up a story. He'd heard about 4 new policemen in town and wanted to write a story about them. As he arrived at the police station looking for Constable Devine, he was met instead by his wife. "Run, for your life is in danger," she cried. Mr. Gill fled into town, telling 2 storekeepers about the warning along the way. The 3 decided they should warn the bank manager as well. They entered the bank, but found it completely empty. One of them knocked on the counter. A voice called from the bank's residence. Just a minute. Suddenly, realising they had likely stumbled right into a hold-up, the three men bolted for the door. Mr. Gill managed to escape. As Ned Kelly, Joe Byrne and their prisoners headed back through the bank's residence towards the hotel, Ned asked Mr. Tarleton to fetch him the bank's revolver. Ned let the manager walk ahead of him towards his bedroom where the gun was kept, until he suddenly realised his mistake. Mr. Tarleton reached his bedroom and grabbed the revolver from his dressing table, just as Ned leapt through the doorway. He went to hit the manager in the head, as Mr. Tarleton handed him the gun and calmly said, "It isn't loaded." With that, Ned Kelly escorted his hostages into the hotel's bar and tossed a 2-shilling coin onto the counter, buying each a drink. With their sack full of money, Joe Byrne and Dan Kelly went back to the police station and barracks. Ned Kelly and Steve Hart bid farewell to the hostages in the hotel, telling them they could go where they liked. Then, Ned escorted Trooper Richards back to the barracks, throwing him back in the lockup with Constable Devine. He handed the cell's key to Mary Devine and told her not to unlock it until 7:30 p.m, or he would burn her house down. Ned headed to the Albion Hotel, where curious locals cheered upon seeing him. After one final drink, Ned was joined by the rest of the Kelly gang, all on horseback. With a tip of his hat, Ned and his gang galloped away in the direction of the Murray River. Overhead, rolling thunder and storm clouds signalled their departure from Jerilderie. It would be another 17 months before the Kelly gang was seen again. Ned had one certain regret from his time in Jerilderie. After escaping the bank, the town's newspaper editor, Mr. Gill, had fled town. When Ned learnt of this, a wave of anger washed over him. There was something he particularly wanted done in Jerilderie, and Mr. Gill was the very man whose assistance he'd needed. Ned had dictated an 8,000-word letter that he wanted published in the Jerilderie paper. In it, he justified his crimes, detailed police corruption, and demanded justice for impoverished families. Because Mr. Gill had left, the manifesto was never published. But, like Ned Kelly and his gang, whose legends live on, immortalised in the Australian imagination, the letter was passed along and survived. Its final line reads, "I am a widow's son, outlawed, and my orders must be obeyed."